Hello there, and welcome to the channel. This is Nerd of War. It's a spin-off channel from my main history channel, which is Nerd.World History, which is linked in the description below. If you're from that channel, welcome to what is the first proper video for this channel, and apologies in advance. I only speak English, and I'm going to be encountering a lot of words that I've either never encountered before, or I simply cannot figure out how to pronounce in my stupid English accent. So apologies in advance for that. This video is specifically about the Battle of Angalopo. And there's the first word that I probably have pronounced incorrectly. I'm pretty certain I've just anglicized a word. This was a battle that took place quite a long time ago, and we're going to talk about it, and specifically a ship that was participant in that battle, which was operated by the Koreans at the time, which is generally known as the Turtle Ship, which is a very fascinating design of vessel. And with all that said, please like, share, subscribe, comment down below, and let me know if you're from one of my other channels in the comments section. And also check out my website and my blog, which is also located on there. Maybe something on there you like as well. And with all that said, let's get into this episode. Starting on the Japanese side, you've got a name I'm probably going to butcher right now, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. A man who started out his life in a peasant background, but would rise through Japanese society to eventually become the right-hand man of one of the most powerful men in Japan, whom he would eventually succeed in 1582, and continue the quest to unify Japan under a single leadership. He would launch the invasion of Korea in 1592, which would spur on the events of this particular story. On the other side of this conflict, you had the Joseon Dynasty. The Joseon Dynasty had ruled over Korea by this point for approximately 5 centuries. Hideyoshi would, as I said, launch an invasion of Korea to initial success, but the long-term ramifications of the conflict would damage his prestige and lead to a stalemate, which would last until his death. But that's a broader story. Let's narrow ours down to this specific battle of Angalopo, which was a naval engagement between the two belligerent forces. Now, the particular type of warships the Joseons were going to bring to this battle, which is commonly known as a turtle ship. I'm going to put the name they call it on the screen because I'm not even attempting to pronounce that, because I have tried. Nope. Sorry, nope. And these ships were actually originally developed sometime in the early 15th century. They participated in a few mock engagements that then kind of fell out of use. Then, about 100 years later, about the time of this war, specifically in 1591, they decided to resurrect this design and begin to use it against the Japanese and Hideyoshi's invasion, which by that point will be oncoming. These would be the principal warships the Joseons would use between 1592 and 1598 during the time of Hideyoshi's invasion. The turtle ship earned its name in Western society because of its general descriptive appearance. It looks like it has an armoured carapace on its back, which because it does. Unlike a normal ship of the age, which would have an open deck and would have had 4 aft castles or other such defences, this vessel, although it was armed with cannons that were mounted straight into the hull, the upper deck of the vessel was covered in armour plate as well as iron spikes, which were designed to prevent enemy boarding action as well as to intimidate. The vessel also had a dragon's head on the front of it, which did give it an overall turtle-like appearance overall. In some instances, the dragon's head was capable of emitting a thick smog that was designed to disorientate the enemy, although that was not standard to every ship of this type. On the Japanese side, Hideyoshi's navy may have numbered up to 9,200 ships. Now, at this time, most Japanese vessels were controlled by different feudal lords, or the shoguns, that controlled Japan, and these were mostly coastal defense warships. not massive seagoing vessels, but by the late 16th century these vessels had improved in size and capability to such vessels such as what may have been the flagship, according to my research, the Nihon Maru, and again my pronunciation is very likely way off, so I apologize, and it may have looked something like this from what I understand, but we'll see. These vessels were used predominantly in this war against the Joseon Navy. They were vastly larger and more heavily armed and generally considered more powerful, which is why the Joseons went for a technological advantage in the ships like the turtle ships that made them just basically early armoured ships, having metal plating on them and things like that, which would have helped withstand cannon fire as well as the use of fire and other fairly nasty weapons you could use at sea. No one wants a ship set on fire in the ocean. It's one of the worst things a sailor can have happen to them. And that brings us to the battle itself. The Battle of Angalopo. Now, it should be pointed out that this is a battle that takes place on approximately the 16th of August 1592. This was 2 days after a larger battle which was called the Battle of Hansando. These two battles combined would be a decisive defeat of the Japanese Navy by the Korean Admiral Yi Sun-sin's fleet. The first battle of Hansando would see roughly 100 Japanese ships destroyed and all Japanese plans pretty much in the area halted. Now, the reason this battle then takes place is the Japanese, basically when they heard about the defeat, wanted to retaliate and knock out the Korean fleet which was opposing them, hoping to catch the Korean fleet off guard and still in harbour. The Japanese sent 42 ships under the commanders Kuki Yoshitaka and Kato Yoshiaki, and I'm sorry, I know I've not pronounced either of them correctly. They would arrive at the port of Angalopo. Now, as I'd said, the Japanese were hoping to catch the Koreans off guard and catch them still in port. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, but the Japanese were not willing to follow the Koreans into open ocean. Now, as I said, the Korean ships, the turtle ships, were capable of taking a hell of a beating, or pretty much impervious to a lot of the weapons the Japanese used. That's not to say they couldn't sink them, but they were giving them a tough time of it. But the Koreans would join the Japanese in battle and bombard them for several hours. Eventually, after destroying several of the Japanese ships, they would be forced to retreat once again. Later, the Japanese returned and escaped on small boats. And although both Japanese commanders survived, this was the end of a series of defeats for the Japanese in this area. It would also undermine Japanese strength throughout the region, and was the beginning effectively of the end of the Japanese invasion. Now, this was not to say, again, the Japanese were not being relatively successful in this war, but the Jovians, or the Koreans, were actually managing to put up a better fight than what the Japanese had anticipated. Now, as I said, this battle was the main thing that brought a reshaping, shall we put it, of Japanese tactics in this conflict. The Japanese needed to control the seas in order to invade Korea. Hideyoshi ordered a focusing of his naval actions to gain control of this peninsula, to gain control of Korea, and stop any and all unnecessary sort of side battles from taking place. This included any aggressive actions towards China. Now, by 1597, the Japanese had actually gained control of this area despite the Korean victories locally. But China was beginning to be concerned about a possible Japanese invasion of the mainland. If the Japanese were able to gain control of Korea and the entire peninsula, they would have an easy in into China and force China to fight a war on two fronts if such a war was ever to happen. As a result, China would send additional naval assets to reinforce their Korean neighbours against the Japanese. This would lead ultimately to the failure of the Japanese military conquest of Korea. Both the combined forces of the Joseon fleet and the Chinese navy would continue to harass Japanese supply lines and prevent them retaining a strong foothold on the Korean peninsula. With the death of Hideyoshi in 1598, who was the main impetus for the invasion and the main proponent behind it, the Japanese effectively ended the war and attempted to retreat, although this was made difficult due to continuous attacks. However, this was still an end to Japanese imperial aggression throughout the region and was the end effectively of the conflict, and it all began at the Battle of Angalopo, which was an attempt by the Japanese to completely smash the Korean Navy and wipe out its command structure. It failed, and as a result the Japanese overall plan failed because they couldn't control the seas, and they effectively drew China into the conflict. So there we have it, the end of this video. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, comment down below, and my uploads to this channel are going to be a little slow because I have a lot of channels, I also have jobs, but I have an interest in military history, which is the purpose for this particular channel. My other channel, Nerd.World History, which this is the sister channel to, has become a little bit more focused on prehistory and certain events and people of that nature. So basically, due to the YouTube algorithm and what demographic I seem to have been dropped into on that channel to talk about another subject, and for the videos to have any kind of traction, new channel. So again, like, share, subscribe, and bye bye.